growing up and being a competitive rock climber where everything is body weight, and so you have to be as tiny as possible, you're wanting to eat just enough to where you can still hit your goals. And that messes up your hormones, that messes up your stress. And then when you get stressed, your body calms down and it doesn't want to be hungry anymore. And so it just all messes up in that whole just cycle. And then it can mess up your body for a while. Because what I did in high school and my past with eating disorders and all of that still affects me today at university, where I'm going to school in North Carolina. Everyone's a lot more open. I'm eating with protein in mind. I'm eating with carbs in mind. But still, when I get stressed, when I get sad, if you're going through a breakup, it's real to shut down and go kind of into starvation mode, and your body doesn't feel hungry. And then that causes real long-term issues. And when all of the girls at university are feeling like that, you kind of act like it's normal and it's a phase that you can get through because everyone's feeling it.
Yeah. And so that brings up two things. One, I'm also a sports nutritionist. And just focusing on eating to have that enjoying what you do and having the power and energy and endurance. And so I tell people over and over, that's the most important part about your fuel. And if you're restricting yourself to look a certain way, to be cut, so many athletes I worked with, they wouldn't get their period. A lot of females in track, for example, when I worked college level, they wouldn't have their period. The coaches didn't care. So the medical doctor and I were always trying to educate girls, if you don't get your cycle because you're restricting so much, that's going to affect your bone density long term. It's going to affect your performance, your endurance. So I always remind people you need to eat to feel good, to be strong, to have that endurance. Sophie, if you don't mind, if I ask a little more of a personal question, what do you think was the deepest struggle for you through all of this, with your relationship with food?
It's hard because in high school, I was battling an eating disorder for honestly all 4 years. I had lost my period for about a year, junior year. I was running before climbing practice, after climbing practice, and everything between, and had those lovely calorie tracking apps that no 16-year-old should own. And I think the hardest part about having an eating disorder is you trying to think if it's enough to look for help. And I feel like I worded that wrong, but basically I would look at my body and think, I'm not skinny enough to come out front about having an eating disorder. I don't look pale enough. I lost my period, but I look fine and I look healthy. And so I can get by with that. But it was the fact that I was climbing, it was the fact that I was running, it was the fact that I was lifting, that my body was just muscle. And it was the fat that was holding on in starvation mode because I wasn't eating enough to maintain anything else. And so that just puts you into a cycle of kind of like denial, of you being like, I could eat enough to climb, I could eat enough to run. And so why did I ever have an eating disorder? But I think an eating disorder circulates more in your thoughts around food than the actual actions. Because I think that's what silences a lot of girls. Looking at a cupcake, seeing how many miles do I have to run if I have to eat that, and not eating the cupcake are similar things, because at the end of the day, an eating disorder is a disordered mindset around food. And so I hate when I see girls of any size not talk about their eating disorder because they're not thin enough to make it worth it, to make it worth the conversation.
You hit it right on the nail. Like, I agree with you 100% that so many people feel an eating disorder has to look a certain way or has to be bad enough, or you have to have certain severe behaviors that you need this intense treatment. But I feel that most youth today, so many have disordered eating habits that really has, as you share, a great impact on your life every minute, every day. So many decisions you make affects your self-care, takes the joy out of your life, takes the joy out of your exercise, the sports you do, the rock climbing. Like before it used to be, I love rock climbing. I love, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, how do I look doing this? Am I lean enough? Am I light enough? And so we have to recognize that, you know, our relationship with food at any level is important enough to address and talk about. And why we do want to look at this relationship that we have with food and really taking care of our microbiome, self-care, quality of life. Ask yourself, how much joy do you have in your life? And where is that missing? There's just so many aspects of this, right?
Yeah.
So many leaves on a tree of how things manifest.
Having an eating disorder affects every single part of your lifestyle, and it mainly affects the relationships you have with others. People can see it, and if people don't see it, they compliment the negative sides of it. If you're losing weight, people don't know how to comment about it because they don't know where your mindset is at. I mainly got through this through having a therapist who I still talk to. I think therapy is great if you want therapy. I think people often try to push it, but you can only have a successful therapy session if you want to be there and if you're comfortable talking about that. And I was very comfortable talking about that. And I also helped myself through journaling. I found love through my body that wasn't just looks wise. And I think, especially in high school, eating disorders are so prevalent because you're around the same people and you're trying to impress one another, not impress one another in the way of, I look good, I'm all that. You just want people to look up to you and think at the end of the day that you're pretty. Because that's what a 16-year-old girl is thinking about. When she sees a boy and they don't like her, the first thing they're going to do is tear themselves apart. And I think that's what going to college, journaling, having a therapist had me build up. I am absolutely so much more than the person I am. And the number on the scale, which I could go on and on about how that number on the scale is
Right,
absolutely
right.
meaningless.
And that's why what we don't teach youth enough today is coping tools, right? Like, how do we practice self-care on a day-to-day basis when stress comes up, when we feel different, when we don't feel good about ourselves? Whether it be just, I know in our family, it's a walk in nature. Like, that is I would say it's our spiritual practice, is being out with nature. We do a lot of backpacking, hiking, and even on a day-to-day basis, just going outside, clearing the mind. Some people, it might be meditation, yoga. I know Quinn, she journals a lot, to process a lot of feelings. And yes, for some, if you're part of a great community group, finding help through your church or your fellowship, your community, it can be anything, but really that self-care is critical. But yes, the therapist is important. It's nice to have someone to talk to about really deep things that you can't talk about with your friends or your parents, because that's how you really process and develop a more positive relationship with yourself.
Of course. And I think self care is amazing. I think it's the best thing you can do as a college student. But I also think there's a line between self care in a harmful way. Because on social media, I see this pushed a ton. When you're stressed, go on a run. When you're stressed, go to the gym. And I I think today's day and age with social media and fitness influencers and beauty influencers, people need to realize that self-care is slowing down your life. It's going on a walk,
Exactly.
it's taking a break in whatever form is possible. And self-care is what makes you feel better. Going on a run and going to the gym are amazing, but they're not replacements for processing your feelings, talking to a family member. When I'm stressed, I call my mom. I tell her everything. I go on a walk, hour-long walks. But I remember in high school when I was stressed and all of that, and I would go out and I would go on a run, and then the run would never end, because when you're stressed and all you're thinking about is everything on your mind, the next exam, if this boy likes me, university, this run is the coping mechanism. But then you're going on this long run and then you're not eating because you're stressed. And that just goes into a cycle of bad habits. And then you're 20 and I still deal with this stuff. I'm not going to act like I'm over this.
Well, especially because you're bombarded with social media too. It's constant reminders of you're not good enough. That's the goal of social media. Like, we want you to need us. So we're going to make you feel inadequate in some way so that you come back and you want more. So taking that break from social media is, except for this podcast here, have a view of us now and then, but you really do need to shut it off. And I think that's why we like backpacking so much as a family, why we love to just be out in nature. We just shut it off. My son, he shared something interesting. He took on jobs doing yard work, and he said he actually loves just not having electronics, just being out in nature, working. He really takes enjoyment from it, not just backpacking. So I'm glad that they have that awareness, but I hope it's an awareness that everyone can have, because it is a constant struggle. It's not like we haven't figured it out. It's always there, right? So how can we create guardrails for ourselves to really remember who we are and what's important to us? And remember, how can we be authentic with others and ourselves? That's really what it's all about.
I think it's important to always have those close connections, whether it's your best friend, my sister, anyone who you can talk to and just be parent and just tell them, not to ask for help. I love when you can just look at someone and say, I'm just going to talk. I don't need advice. I just need someone to listen. And I think you always need that in your life.